Today's session is all about a day in the life of a complaints handler. And I'm so excited today that I'm joined by a couple of old colleagues, actually, of mine from my co-op days. Chris Ward, who is now part of the Marcus Study Group, and is going to tell us a little bit about himself and his role. And I'm also joined by Paul Evans, who's actually still works for the co-op and is currently in a complaint handler role. So he's going to tell us a little bit more about his day-to-day stuff. So before I pass over to those guys, these sessions are all about, they're a programme of virtual events showcasing contact centre careers. So we're going to be highlighting all the different careers that you can have within a contact centre. And as we all know, there's lots and lots of different avenues and pathways that you can take to progress your career in a contact centre. And we are going to showcase those for everyone out there who's interested in a career and who wants to know a little bit more about it. So thanks for joining me. Chris, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, cheers, Sarah. Thanks very much. Yeah, so as you said, less of the old, but yeah, I've been working in financial services, customer service for, well, since 2000. So that's what, 23 years ago, isn't it? And I've done loads and loads of different roles in that time, working from life. But I started off really when it was all the pensions review stuff, deep in pensions and technical pension stuff. And then moved as the contact centre started to become more centralised and developed. I did a lot of project work bringing contact centres together, and then I worked through sales, service, new business, and then ultimately into claims. And then on the side in between, I've done loads of stuff on quality, continuous improvement, root cause analysis. And then for the last, I would say it must be about 7, 8 years, no, probably more than that, probably 10 years, I've been working in complaints roles, firstly for Marcus Study for 5 or 6 years. And for the last sort of 3 or so years over at Marcus Study Group, which has been really interesting, and there's a lot I can talk about probably in the challenges and all the good stuff that happens with that.
Yeah, and just for anyone who doesn't know, what do Marcus Study do?
Yeah, so Marcus Study, it's actually quite complicated really, but I'll keep it short and sweet. So basically, it's in insurance lines, personal line insurance, but also a lot of specialist insurance. So things like equine insurance for horses, racing cars, private airline, but then all your personal lines business like your general home and motor, and then there's some agricultural stuff, there's buses, tractors, taxis, really whatever you could think of. Probably we're doing it somewhere or other, either through ourselves, through one of our broker partners, or other people we work with.
Yeah, so quite an interesting, varied insurance, isn't it? It's not just cars and homes. Yeah. So,
no.
So Market, sorry, just to chip in, Market Study is actually one of our stakeholders as well within the co-op. On yes. The co-op insurance side of it. So we've got a small team who will look into complaints from, we call it abbreviated CISL, which is like co-op insurance.
Yes.
Such as pet insurance, car insurance, and home insurance, and that. So yeah. So quite familiar with Market Study.
Absolutely, yeah. And on a monthly basis, I meet with your colleagues, Paul, at Co-op.
Yeah.
And talk through how is my team delivering on complaints performance on behalf.
Yeah. So I speak to a couple of your guys. Yeah. Is it Katie Mundy? Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll delve into that actually, because obviously with such a complex business, I'm sure there's lots of things that you'll be able to share with us as well. And you just touched on a little bit there, Chris, about your career, and obviously you've gone through lots of different functions in a contact centre in lots of different areas. And anybody listening to this or will be really interested in that and how you got into it. So we can talk about that a little bit later as well. So Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, of course. So a bit of a similar background to Chris, really. So I've been in the financial service industry and the contact centre environment for best part of 20 years now. When I first moved to Manchester in 2004. So I was a team leader in the contact centre back then, and was for a company called Sesame Bancorp, where we just process commission on independent financial advisors, such as Fidelity, etc. Then I became like a fraud analyst for a company called WillPay. So with that, being from fraud analyst, I was dealing with complex conversations, difficult conversations with potential fraudsters. Did that for over 8 years. So there's like duck to water taking on the complaints role, because I was used to that kind of those conversations. So I started off in the contact centre at the co-op on the sales team, and I left to join the Hook Group, and it just didn't work out, personal life balance. So I came back to the co-op and shortly promoted to a complaint specialist, and now I'm on a seconded senior specialist role till the end of the year.
Great, brilliant. So again, like Chris, very varied career, and
yeah.
you're already touching on some of the skills you need for those kind of roles. So I'm gonna
Very
do a
much.
massive deep dive into those as well later.
Look
So
forward
yeah,
to it.
thanks for teeing us up there, Paul. Great stuff. Yeah. So Chris, tell us a little bit, if anybody's coming new to this and they don't understand contact centres, tell us a little bit about a complaints function in a contact centre, and who they serve almost. Who do they support and how do they serve them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think well, there's different models really, to be honest. So I'll kind of talk about probably what's the most common one, but there's all different varieties and shades about how do complaints teams support frontline contact centres. So usually kind of what you see in most contact centres, certainly ones with any size or scale, you've usually kind of got your frontline guys, whether it be a claims advisor or a sales advisor or someone that's just taking day-to-day queries. Obviously, in the day-to-day business of kind of what customers are interacting with, whatever your company is, for us it's insurance, there's going to be times where things aren't right and the customers, you think you're getting a customer who's going to say, kind of renew my policy, and then you've got a customer there who's not happy for whatever reason. There's something on their documents, we've made an administrative mistake, or maybe we haven't made a mistake, but the customer still feels something isn't right and they haven't received the service they should do. So kind of the first layer that sits in contact centres usually is what is often known as FPOC, so first point of complaint or first point of complaint resolution. And I think the really key thing here is that complaints isn't something that sits in the corner like a dirty subject or something that no one wants to talk about. It's really important that complaints is front and centre in everyone's mind, in everyone's role, no matter where you are in the organisation. And it starts from that very first phone call that you have with the customers as they come in. So I think really key from out of the complaints team, and certainly from my experience, can kind of support frontline handlers and frontline team managers and operational managers, is you really make sure that they've got the support, the skill sets, the knowledge that they might need, the training material that they might need, and they've got a voice and someone they can speak to. So kind of in my organisation at the moment, we've got an advice line internally. So people on that front line, they can ring on direct dial line into my team and go, I've got this customer on the phone, or this is happening, this is circumstance, this is scenario. I think this is the right thing to do for this customer. I think I can resolve it. I think I can put it right. Can you give me any advice? Can you tell me about redress limits? Can you tell me about, what can I say to the customer? What do I need to do technically? So we've got that real-time support and guidance in there for them.
Yeah.
And then
that's great actually, because you're right. Traditionally, complaint teams have always sat maybe separately and on even on a different floor in a different building, and it's almost like we don't deal with it on the front line and we pass it over. And what you're saying and describing is try and resolve that. So it's almost the customer service advisor's job to do that as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's really difficult. And I think, Paul, you touched on there, and we've all had the experience of it. But those difficult conversations are, they're really tricky and they're really difficult. They were really tricky and really difficult when you were sat in an office with the team manager next to you and your team and stuff next to you. Now you might be sitting in your living room, your kitchen, your bedroom, wherever you are, and you're working from home day if you're doing hybrid working. The next minute you've got someone on the phone screaming and shouting at you, reasonably or not. And it feels quite personal. It's in your space. It's in your home. And I think, it's become even more and more important that, that support mechanism is in place for people not to feel isolated and to feel empowered to try and resolve things for customers. So I think that's really key and fundamental, really. And then
sorry, Chris. I think just touching on that as well, one of the biggest challenges we experience is where, like Sarah just said, often on the outside team, the complaints departments, but also the kind of the go-to team as well. So that mechanism of support from the customer service department, they just to pass it on to a complaint without trying to actually deal with it themselves at first line. So we almost get the brunt of it all, where actually that could have been resolved at the customer service level. So we're trying to deliver an education piece and a training piece. Well, actually, fine handling the complaints if they're showing dissatisfaction. However, it could have been resolved at this instance and it wouldn't have escalated that level.
Absolutely,
And that's always a tricky one, though, isn't it, Chris? That whole dissatisfaction, recognizing dissatisfaction against what is a complaint, isn't that? There's always been a bit of a fine line, hasn't there, as well? So
and I think that's still the case. I think, and it ultimately, yes, there's guidance, yes, there's there's the definitive kind of regulatory view of what a complaint is, and that's pretty clear. But the shades of everything, and you've got to understand your customer, and it's not just like a customer said, I am going to make a complaint. We all know it might be the unspoken things, and I think that's that's really important, that you can identify, sort of empathise and understand people's anger, people's frustration. If someone goes quiet and they're not engaging with you, is there something wrong here? Are they vulnerable? Do I need to understand a bit more about this person's circumstances? Something's not right here. And then, you know, and the customer then opens up and says, yeah, do you know what? Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but, you know, I've been really worried about this. And then, you know, it might be we've done something wrong and we've got the opportunity to put it right and resolve it at that point from there.
Yeah.
Do you want me to tell a bit about kind of then how it kind of organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How does it go past the first line?
Yeah, and then that kind of links into career progression and upskilling and roles and what people can do with their careers as they move forward. So generally what you then see is, like we've talked about the sort of frontline resolution, then generally you have kind of what you saw your complaints team, the one that, like you said, sits in the corner on a different floor somewhere else. So like a team of, you know, really skilled specialist colleagues with various different role levels within the team. So broadly what they'll do, they'll get the complaints that can't be resolved by the front line, and they need a bit more investigation. They might be really complicated, really technical. For example, some of the guys in my team, you might be dealing with complaints on substances, you know, where your house has started to subside, or a house that's completely burnt down, like, you know, it might be gutted, or, you know, people in alternative accommodation, or really, you know, really tragic and difficult motor claim complaints involved multiple vehicles and injuries and things like that. So what they do, they kind of got a portfolio of information. So the customer says, I'm not happy about X, Y, and Z. Their role is then to go and get all the information from the various people, whether it be loss adjusters, it could be a police report, a witness statement, CCTV footage, documents, financial documents, things like that. Listen to what the customer's saying, go away and have a, you know, a well-balanced, fair view of what's happened here. Is the customer's complaint justified? Could we have done something more? Has something gone wrong here? Should we have spotted that? And are we responsible for it? And then engaging with the customer early on, phone call out to them to understand, what is your complaint about? What do you want it to be resolved? What does your resolution look like? And then to go through that investigation and say, okay, well, I've found X, Y, and Z, and I agree with you. We could have done this better, or, you know, although you're not happy with this, let me explain to you why it's dealt with like this. For example, liability is really emotive. You know, you've had an accident, someone's driven into your parked car, you weren't there, and you think, well, why is it my fault? So we're then in a position to try and educate and understand customers, and then obviously deliver our outcome, do anything we need to do to put them right, whether it be financially, taking action on the claim, make a decision on a policy. It could be anything really, but making sure that's fair, consistent, and that the customer understands it. You've got different shades of complaints that sit within those teams. And I think probably it's worth saying, kind of, you sort of touched on it a bit, Paul, is you've got potentially the opportunity to start that FBOT training, and some people just take to complaints. It's a funny thing to say, but it's something. There's usually something in you kind of want to help people. You've got a certain way of dealing with customers, you know, and they often are the people that move into those central complaints teams. And they have all the skills from their day-to-day role. They know the systems inside out. They know the customers. They've got the experience, and then they can apply it, kind of take that step back and look at it from there.
Yeah. And do you think that is the natural pathway from somebody who's maybe been on the phones doing customer service or sales or something like that, and then they find that pathway to complaints? Is that the normal route, do you think?
Yes, I would say so. It's quite uncommon that you would have someone come in completely cold and fresh to that arena.
Yeah.
That being said, complaints handling, complaints investigation, working and having those conversations is more it's not behavioural, but it's more about potentially how you interact with people. So it doesn't really matter if you worked at electricity utility or a water company or something like that, and you handle complaints there and you move across. Yeah. I think you've got the skill set. That's probably the hardest bit to train, and there's only so far you can go with training. You can coach and you can train, but fundamentally it's often about how you are as a person. Technical stuff, using the systems, you log in here, you fill in this letter, you do the email. Yes, it can take time to do, but that ultimately that's as good as the training and you know, and people picking it up. So I would say it doesn't pigeonhole you or ring fence you into a certain. I'm going to say this because I've been in financial services 20 years, but it doesn't ring fence you into a particular sector. And I've seen many people that move between utilities, housing, financial services, you know, transport and all sorts of stuff. So I think once you've got that skill set, you can take it anywhere. You
can move the experience around.
Definitely.
Just to echo that as well, Chris, I think obviously it is seen as a promotional stepping towards a complaints team as well from a contact centre agent, just because of the responsibility you have and the kind of task you carry out. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, we do have 8-week training programs within the complaints team, but I think for complaints handlers, a lot of natural skills that you're born with just to be successful within the role. There's only so much empathy you can learn. You know, you've naturally got it, or you haven't. Do you know what I mean? That compassion and that that level of concentration and focus. It's a natural skill as well as the actual training you put through as well to be successful within the role.
Yeah. And I think Chris said it as well. You want to help people, don't you? So,
of course, yeah, that's the nature of that.
Yeah, you've talked about that, Paul, is that empathy, that's your natural, and that's always hard to train, isn't it? We always talk about, training all the soft skills is a really tough one. So what skills do you need? Chris, let me go to you first. What would you say from running a complaints department? What are you looking for from people?
Yeah, from the frontline hand point of view, I think I'll start off with the behavioural type thing. Fundamentally, I think it's got to be about someone that wants to help, somebody that's got empathy, someone that's got understanding. They're sort of the softest kind of skills, I suppose you would want. But then from a complaint sort of handler point of view, it's a bit like being an investigator. You've got to be sort of acquisitive. You've got to want to understand the answer. You've got to be nosy. You've got to kind of say, do you know what, business might be going, no, we've done nothing wrong. You've got to have a bit of something about you saying, no, I'm sorry, I've looked at this customer's complaint. The customer's saying X, Y, and Z, and I agree with the customer. I know your process says it's right, but from a customer's step back, you've got to kind of have that no fear and that kind of ability to challenge and question and query. And that is really difficult. And you think you're dealing with a complaint there, and you potentially got head of a department, head of claims, head of, I don't know, sales, whatever, and they've got their process and they think it's all happy and rosy. It's quite a difficult skill set to have. And I think the other thing as well, you've got to help people and share internally as well. You've got to be engaged with your team, engaged with frontline, engaged with all your stakeholders, and then you've got to be clear, concise, and have a clear view about how you're going to resolve that complaint.
Yeah, so and it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've never thought of it. And I thought of all the things that empathy and sympathy and, being level-headed and, resilient a little bit. But I hadn't really thought about the stuff about being kind of like getting to the bottom of stuff and, and you're right, pushing back to senior stakeholders and kind of going, no, this isn't right. And almost like having conviction of your actions, isn't it? So that's really interesting, actually. And for anyone who's thinking about that role in the future, it's they can probably sit down and go tick 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 tick, can't they? Or some practical skills as well as some behavioural ones.
Absolutely, yeah. And then if you take it to the kind of next level, so like you were saying, Paul, often the contact centres, frontline teams are kind of the feeder into complaints teams. What we do see is we do see a fair bit of sort of what we'd call positive attrition internally, where people have built that skill set, that investigative typing stuff. They're then able to move into more senior fraud roles, investigative roles, product manager roles. People move into actually managing one of the insurance products and portfolios. They understand the customer journey, they understand the pitfalls, they've got that thinking, and it allows people to move into all sorts of roles within the organisation, project work, as I said, product management, fraud, finance teams. We've seen people move into analytics roles because from their complaints they did some reporting within their complaints role, and they've able to take that into an analytics role. So I think it's kind of endless, really.
Yeah. Legal roles as well. So a few of that's interesting. Legal roles on the back of what they've learned in the complaints team as well. Just going back a few comments there. I think with regards to the skill set, it's the ability to also remain neutral as well. When you're doing the investigation, so it's okay listening to the complaining, but then you've got to sit on the fence as well. So you've got to hear the co-op side or the business side of a version of events as well. And not always can the complaint points be evidenced. So it's having that confidence and ability to make your final resolution on the outcome and stand by it. And it's obviously and it's satisfying for me personally when I've made that, especially if it's in the favour of the claimant, you get good feedback. But I've had many escalation calls where they're very unsatisfied with the outcome, and then you've got to go through the escalation process. But we'll go into that more later with some of the other questions you may have for us.
Yeah, no, well, I was going to say that. Tell me a little bit, Paul, about how you got there and what, why it ended up being your career pathway.
So obviously I worked in a contact centre environment now for many years, doing various roles. I started on the sales team. I've always been told I could sell chocolates to Cadbury's. So I think it's just the scouts and me, the gift of the gab. So I was very successful within that role. But I very much loved what I did at WorldPay on the fraud analyst side of things. I loved the difficult conversations. I felt like I was just good at it with the skill set that I could bring personally with listening, investigation skills, dealing with various different types of people, angry, concerned. I could deal with all kinds of different people, just sort of a natural ability that I had. So when the complaints opportunity arisen, I went for it and was successful. I've also got leadership skills there as well from previous management roles. So then the senior opportunity came up very soon after. And that's where I got into where I am today. So I took on a 3-month secondment in April. It got to July very, very quickly.
Yeah. Often does.
Yeah, it does. But obviously, with what I brought to the team, I was able to reduce numbers of complaints down and obviously evidence that with what I brought to the team. My secondment's been actually extended now till the end of the year.
Right.
So here I am, still a senior
Brilliant.
complaint specialist.
Did you have well, I guess the answer is no, kind of, but did you have that as your path? Because I when I go back 23 years ago, never did I think this is the role I'd be doing. It wasn't. You know, I had goals and how I'd move forward. I wanted to move into leadership roles and do different stuff, but I didn't have this as a defining. In 20 years, I want to be, you know, head of complaints, own a complaint team.
Yeah, kind of. So my goal was always to manage people. I want to be a team manager within a contact centre. I'm very much a people's person. That's my biggest attribute. I'm not my flaws, not flaws. My weakness is probably like Excel level things, the nitty gritty sort of stuff. But put me in front of 20 people, I'll get the best out of them. So that was my goal. So. But then I always loved the forward analyst, the different conversations. So it's kind of like opened up this pathway where I get the best of both worlds now. So I'm on the right route for my career path as it stands. I believe I am anyway.
Yeah. Good. So how do you think that what you enjoy doing from a leadership point of view goes into the complaints bit? I know you're doing the senior bit, so you're probably leading and managing some people, but what skills do you think almost transferable from those leadership ones?
From me personally, or for what I expect from the complaint agents?
No, more really from your point of view, Paul.
So again, I've got a lot of management experience, but it's the natural attributes. I'm the same person in work than I am out of work. Do you know, some people put their makeup on, they're a different person walk through the door. I'm not that person. I'm the same with my team, as I am with my children, as I am with my friends, as I am with my partner. I'm just a very
authentic.
So what you see is what you get. So some people call me Mark, might you either love me or you hate me. Do you know what I mean? But at least you know where you stand. And I bring that to the team. I think I get the best out of the team because I'm there for them. I'm support them. They're my first point of call. If I'm in the middle of a project, I'll drop that for the team. And comments about feedback is things like, oh, it's nice to have someone to go to have that level of support. And I don't always know the answer, but I'm there to listen to them and find out for them. So I work very closely with my team, carry out very, very informal one-to-ones, and return to work. So unless it's a documented discussion, I have to obviously go through the correct process. But it's just a natural skill set, the listening, understanding, fair but firm as well. So obviously not let people take advantage, having a fair but firm attitude, saying, you know, I'm a nice guy, but obviously, you know, we have processes and conduct to adhere to as well. So
especially I would say especially in the regulated world as well, and you guys are both from regulated worlds. Tell me a little bit about how that is within a complaints function. Chris, do you want to tell me maybe from a more you know a holistic view?
So I think you've hit the nail on the head, really. I mean, having said that, financial services is highly regulated. I think we're seeing more and more, you know, across all sectors, you know, all different parts. Things are becoming more regulated anyway. So I think it doesn't really matter what sector you work in. A lot of the principles and regulation are things that you should be wanting to do anyway, and they should be things that you're doing in the spirit of because it's the right thing to do for the customer, as opposed to being rule number 1 says do this, rule number 2 says that. But I think, it absolutely puts an extra layer of kind of responsibility control in it. And so for my role, really, there's a whole lot of regulatory reporting we have to do every 6 months. We have to let the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority for us, know about our complaint volumes, how have we dealt, what's our performance, how have we done those, and we have to be really super accurate with that. We've got to have really good data that we can stand behind and, you know, be absolutely confident this is telling us what's happening. But the other thing is obviously all the requirements. We talked before about the skill set and frontline being empowered. We've got to be able to evidence, you know, that we've got a suitable training competency scheme in place. We've got a suitable quality framework in place. We've got the right training. We've got the right tools. We've got the right guidance. Are the spans of controls right between managers and advisors? Have they got the right, availability to speak to them for support? So we've got all that. Are processes documented correctly? Have we got a change control? Can we evidence that the right people are involved? Has legal reviewed it? Has compliance reviewed it? Am I happy from an operational point of view? Then on the side of it, we got all the system stuff that I've got a guy, somebody in my team, Kate, who she looks after our configuration for our complaint systems. Is the workflow working right? Are the letters right? Are the templates right? Have we got the right regulatory disclaimers? Have we got the right headers and footers? Is it even the right regulator? Because some of the stuff we do is Maltese, some it's Gibraltar, some it's in the UK. So, there's so much stuff to think about. Yeah. And I think, I guess the thing that sits over the top of all of that is organisation, planning, having the right controls in place, and then having the right checks to validate that your controls work. And I think it seems a lot of work sometimes to get your risk framework in place, get your control standards in place, and get all your, it's not housekeeping because it's really important. But if you've got all that key stuff in place, I can tell you in the long run, it definitely is in your favour because you can evidence things. You will get questions on it. Things will go wrong. And I can talk a bit more about that later if you like, kind of how you react to those. But having that groundwork in place and those foundations and having a common understanding across your team and all your key stakeholders to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you're going to evidence it, it makes your life a lot easier. And I think it's a good practice to get into. It's a difficult practice to get into and it takes discipline. Yeah. But it definitely pays off.
And that's really interesting because there's so much to think about, isn't there? Especially when you're in a regulated environment. So, Paul, doing the job day to day in a regulated environment, what are the kind of things that you're very conscious of, or what are the things you've got to keep an eye on and do?
So, from a complaints aspect, we have now from a regulated background, we have to close a complaint case in 56 calendar days. When I first come onto the team, people within the team are closing on the 56th calendar day, which is not great. It's not great to do adhere to that rule because then you could easily breach. And we have had previous breaches. We've had to report it to the FCA. So it's just managing the expectations of not breaching and putting in certain processes to help close the cases quicker and sooner. So I in a place where we were focusing on complaints, not especially the oldest ones, but the higher level day ones. So on day 25, there's 17 cases there. But let's reduce that number. So when it gets to day 56, it'll be easier to action and close. Yeah. So my biggest focus on a week-to-week basis is obviously making sure cases don't breach, make sure the correct conversations are being had. GDPR has been completely correctly on the calls, so carrying out QA and all that on the agents, make sure they're not breaching regulation on calls. And also feeding back, because we're quite new to regulation. We only became regulated last year. And suddenly one day we're not regulated, next day we are, and everyone's like panic. Everyone's petrified of doing a thing wrong. So there's no relaxing, everyone's too scared. Like if someone goes, like raise a complaint, that's a sign of dissatisfaction, just huffed. Well, that's not necessarily the case now. A year on, we've mellowed out a bit. We can understand what dissatisfaction is. So we'll address it there and then we'll ask them, do you still want to raise a complaint? It's like most of the time, no, it's not. I just want this fixed, please.
Yeah. So it feels like it's constantly learning, isn't it? You kind of,
completely, 100%. Yeah.
Just evolving in, especially with it being new to you guys.
Yeah, even the process of evolving. So, I mean, funeral plan, only the plan holder could buy it under regulation, but now, no, actually, the power of attorney can actually buy a funeral plan for the plan holder. You couldn't have done that 12 months ago, but there's just a bit more leniency. And I don't even think it's that. I think it's just more of an understanding of what you can actually do and can't do. Yeah. Where on the 29th of July 2022, you were scared. You're petrified to do a foot wrong.
This was going to be my question, actually. So this is for people who might be considering a career in complaints, and it can sound a little bit scary, can't it? You're all that regulation, and as you said, Paul, you've got some quality control, you've got processes, and managing timescales and breaches and all that. So it can seem a little bit scary, but with the right support and training, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we'll do. Just touching on what you just said then. I think if an external candidate was coming in, I think they'd find it easier to adhere to because they're not familiar with our previous processes. Where if somebody who's here pre-regulation and they're going into a regulated environment, they're like, my lord, I can't do this anymore. I can't do that anymore. But so I mean, the advice I'd give to someone who wants to be successful as a complaint handler is obviously be resilient. because obviously don't take the conversations personally, because you're going to have those difficult conversations. You're going to be swore at, you're going to be shouted at, there's going to be demands that you can not necessarily can hear. So just don't take it personally. That's the key thing to me. I never take any conversation home with me. Touched on it previously, stay neutral and independent, listen to both sides of the parties. If it's a complaint about the co-op, in my instance, listen to both parties, understand, get all the facts together when viewing the complaints, and just be very focused. Attention to detail is key. Before you send that final resolution letter out, make sure you've covered all the points on, and you can provide evidence and for the reason for your resolution.
Yeah.
No, I'd agree, and I think, you know, it's ultimately, if you put yourself in the shoes of kind of why you're doing this role, and putting the customer in the centre of your thinking, and absolutely balancing kind of with the business need, is like, you know, have I understood what the impact is on this customer? It's easy, like, for example, I don't know, if you take someone's car's in for repair and it's been delayed, you kind of think, oh, well, it's not with the car, a bit delayed. We start asking the right questions. Well, why is it important? Well, I'm a carer. I need my car to get my mother, my father, whoever it might be from that. So it's kind of having that understanding, and then kind of within the framework you've got, coming up with the right solutions. Obviously, everyone can't just go out wacky way and just offer anything to anyone at any time, but it's like, what's fair, what's appropriate, and if there's something you think you should be able to do for the customer, again, back to my other point before, you know, well, the process doesn't say I can do this, but escalate it. Ask the question, you know, what would work for this customer is giving them, I don't know, something we wouldn't normally give someone. It doesn't cost us any more, but it's not in our normal process. Can we go ahead and do that? And it's having that understanding and flexibility. And I think, back to your point from a regulatory point of view, I think the single questions that are really pertinent, got to be asked, is, have you tried to do the right thing for the customer? Is that what you've done? It's not like a carte blanche, do everything, bend over back, but you've got to be able to say, you know, I've stepped back and I've thought about it, and I've considered what's the right thing to do, and then you've stuck to it. And like you said, Paul, you can evidence and you'll stand behind that decision.
Yeah, cool.
And you said that, didn't you, Chris? You said, you know, regulation is there to serve the customer, isn't it? It's there to do the right thing for the customer. So if you're doing those things, you know, organically as a business, then you're almost working within the boundaries of regulation anyway, aren't you? Yeah. So one of the things is we kind of talked about what is it like when it goes wrong then, you know, so what this session is to prepare people for the role, what kind of skills and experience you need, but also kind of preparing the what could be the day-to-day stuff. So tell me a little bit about when things go a little bit wrong, Chris, and then Paul, you can tell me from a day-to-day point of view.
Absolutely, things go wrong. But before we started today, Sarah, I was saying to you, you know, last night, working away last night, I was like, oh, this doesn't look right. I think we've got a bit of an issue here. You know, this process doesn't look like it's working properly. Have we got a system issue here? And, you know, mad flow of activity this morning to kind of work out what's going on with it. But I think the key thing from this is, you know, you've got to kind of take it in your stride. You've got to be able to prioritise. You know, I don't know about you, Paul, probably the same for all of us. There's 101 different things that you've got on the go at once. You know, things to do with people, regulatory stuff, customer stuff, system stuff, you know, engagement things. And it's really been able to have a plan to say, right, what is the thing that's most important now? Why is it most important? And be able to prioritise that and do the right thing with it. And, you know, it's having the right people, knowing who to contact. You know, if it's a system issue, have you got the right contacts in IT that you can go to? Articulate the problem clearly. You know, don't just do things by email. It's so easy for people just be sending emails to each other. You know, like this morning, it's like, guys, just let's get off the email. Let's just get on a quick Teams call for 15 minutes, half an hour. And what we did in that 15 minutes, half an hour, having all the right stakeholders in place, the people who knew the systems and what's gone on and the outcome. And from my position, my operational manager, you know, be able to work through and say, right, okay, we've identified the problem. What's the impact? And what we're going to do about it, and then you can make decisions. Can it something we can fix ourselves? Is it something we need to escalate up into the business and make them aware? Is it a regulatory issue? Is there a customer detriment? If there is, how are we going to go back and put that correct? So it's really just keeping your calm. It's easy for me to say now after the mad panic this morning. But
this morning.
Exactly. Keep you calm. Keep the plan. Know the right people. Know your processes really. And if you don't know the answer to it, ask the people that do, because we've got risk specialists, we've got legal specialists, we've got system specialists, we've got all sorts of people we can call on and rely on. So I think it's a bit of a waffle really, but I think it's just step back, don't panic, see what you got to do, and then work a clear plan through it. And it is about juggling. It's absolutely about juggling, and it's knowing who needs your support and who needs your help as well. You might have a really important regulatory thing, but you might have a member of your team or someone who, you know, is just not having a good day, or they need to speak to you. you've got to be able to take that call. It's not as black and white as all the regulatory stuff comes first. Your people are probably the most important thing that you can have, and it's juggling that and challenging that. And I think the other thing is don't be afraid to push back on. It feels uncomfortable to me because I'm not the sort of person that likes to push back. I want to deliver everything doing time. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just got to go, right, I know I said I was going to get this piece of work for you. I was going to do this paper for you last week. This and this has come in. These are more important. This is why it's more important to me. Are you okay if I move a piece of work out or our meeting out for a couple of weeks at the time? Have that conversation, be transparent, be open. And 99% of the time, everyone's willing to shuffle stuff around and you all get the right outcome. So I think don't be scared to hold your ground, I think, as well.
Yeah. So in when you're working day to day, Paul, what kind of things go wrong or could potentially go wrong if you're in that role?
Yeah, so there's two levels of things that could go wrong. I think when working complaints, and you can see a trend that the reason for the complaint is because of what we're doing, whether it be the contact centre or a different stakeholder within the business or departments. So I think we had a known finance issue. We had loads of funeral plans cancelled that were for no reason last year. So it's going through that, identifying that, and we've implemented recently a feedback tool within our systems, so we can identify trends and feedback to the agency manager who makes these repeat errors. So that maintains the complaint volume and it keeps our customers safe as well. And the biggest one for us now with regulators is obviously, again, breach of cases. We have to ensure if a case is breached, that it's logged correctly, it's reported to the FCA, the right people are aware of it, managers, compliance officers, all are notified for the breach. Why is it being breached? What steps to be taken? So obviously have a discussion with the person who's the case handler, why it's being breached, to get an understanding, see if there's a learning piece there, some training needs there to find out what it's breached, or understand their work volume, because like Chris said, not just the seniors and managers, the complaints agents have got a lot of cases in their name. So it's not, it's, do you know what I mean? They've got to we're telling these people to, they've got to be resilient, they've got to take care. But at the same time, it's a very, very fast-paced environment, and we're only human as well. So there's going to be errors. We just have to manage those expectations, make sure they have, like Chris said, make sure they've got all the support that they need to ensure that, if anything does go wrong, or we can prevent it from going wrong, and what actions do we take, any remedial actions with the customer. Obviously, that's our main focus. And just make sure everything's now regulated, everything's logged correctly to the FCA.
Yeah, it's obviously important, is it? So what's a typical day like for a complaints advisor then, Paul? So like you come in the morning, what do you do?
For me personally, as a senior or one of the complaints advisors?
Well, yeah, if you could just talk about when you were a complaints advisor, just maybe give us a little bit of a typical day.
Yeah, of course. So I'll look onto the system. I'd review any existing cases, complaint cases that are outstanding in my queue, gauge an update on what I'm up to with it. Usually I'll be waiting for responses from stakeholders or the customers or other areas of the business. So I'd work through all those first. So see if I can progress with the complaint investigation, or I could get to a resolution with that information. I would then review any concurrent new complaint investigations, start the investigations on those. But at the same time, I'd also be on the queue, on the phone lines, ready to take incoming calls or internal calls from the front line. People actually do all of the phone, raise the complaints, then would log the new complaints also there. That's from a complaint handle expectations, and that's kind of your day-to-day then, is managing your own expectations. Then from a senior perspective, I'd come in the mornings, I'd allocate the cases myself to the guys, to the agents.
Yeah.
Obviously providing support with their cases as well. So I'm very, like such a brief, I'm very on hand with them all. And I also review and work financial ombudsman cases as well. That's the next step of escalation. So if the customers aren't satisfied with our guys' resolutions, they escalate that to FOS and they come, financial ombudsman, then they come back to me directly, and I do a further investigation on top of that and provide an outcome on that.
Yeah.
And also complete QA and one-to-ones, etc.
Yeah. So typically, as an analyst, how many complaints would you manage in a day? I know this will vary sector and industry or whatever, but just could you just do one a day? Is it 10 a day?
So the guys have targets. So one, depending on the complexity of the case, if it's a very at-need funeral home-based case, you might just get through one. Some days you might get through 6. The target, as it stands, is 3.5 cases closures per day. So that's measured over the course of the month. So if you do close 1 or 2 a day, that's fine. You can catch up throughout the month. And 4 is the stretch target, which will depend on your obviously your annual objectives then.
And Chris, is that pretty similar to your teams?
Yeah, I mean, it varies as well between, like you said there, it varies in the products, you know. So the home ones generally much more detailed, take much more investigation. The straightforward ones, you know, didn't like the phone call the whole times, or, you know, the conversation work like admin type stuff, and, you know, simple lower level stuff. You can get through those pretty quickly. The time really is having the quick phone call with the customer, explaining, apologising, and doing your wrap-up work. So yeah, I mean, I think if you just look at informal ones, you can probably to the higher end of what you're saying there, Paul. But some of the ones we've got here, you know, we've got ones sometimes that take 3 or 4 days to do. So we've, you know, a complex house fire one with loads of delays and different contractors involved and different elements and stuff. It's you know, it's a big old document bundle like that, and it's like a portfolio really to manage.
Yeah. And what skills do those people need to kind of manage those very complex cases? Are they very similar to what's needed before? Yeah,
I think so. Oh, go on, Paul.
Oh, sorry. I'd say so. Yeah, and it's just it's attention to detail, and obviously it's organisation's key. Because if you've got 10, 15 cases in your queue, you need to know where you are with up to every single one. You need to be on top of any communication that comes through from the other departments or the client. You need regular contacts. It's that obviously that compassion with the customers. I'll keep them updated what's going on. Even if you don't have an update, call a customer and tell them that. So just let you know I'm still looking into your query. I'll be with you as soon as possible. I'm from a regulated background as well. We do send out acknowledgement letters and holding letters, just to keep them informed on a regulated basis as well. But it's organisation's key, and just keeping on top of your workloads and know where you're up to with each one. So they don't
and we all know that there's lots of information in contact centres, and we all use it very differently. You know, there's those key performance indicators that know that you are performing well as a business.
Of course,
you're also, you know, how you perform as an individual. So are there any particular measures that people on the front line are measured against?
Yeah, so there's adherence. They measure against their adherence. So how long they're on the phone. So adherence is whereby if you're logged on for 7.5 hours, it will show that you're logged on for 7.5 hours. But then there's also conformance as well. So you might be logged on for 7.5 hours, but are you doing what you're supposed to be doing on queue? Are you on queue? You're taking your lunch at the right time? Are you allocated the offline work? Your conformance is measured on that. And obviously you've got your QA performance as well. So you're measured on 3 calls a month. That's got to be above 95%. And
you know, when you talk about calls, is that calls that you might talk about resolving a complaint, or is it?
Any inbound. It doesn't have to be a resolution. It's just a complaint agent's call.
Okay.
I'll pick a call out the schedule and listen to the call through its entirety. And there's certain sections, and you've got 4 levels of marking. You've got a pass with learn, a fail fair. So it's a fail, but there's no detriment to the customer. And a fail unfair, where it's a fail, but it is detriment to the customer.
That's very
is that the same?
Exactly the same,
yeah.
Oh, that's good to know then, isn't it? Yeah. And so the measured on quality then, really, isn't it? Is that kind of, you know, that's the main piece, rather than volume. Like, you know, you've got to get 6 done in a day, and that's all that matters.
It's still a KPI. I mean, the KPI for closes is 3.5, like I said, 3.5 a day.
Yeah.
But you step back and you look at all 4. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? I step back. So if you've achieved all 3, because only KPIs, they're only indicators. Do you know what I mean? You don't, their annual yearly scoring doesn't have to be based on the KPIs. They're just an indicator of the performance. So it's just something to manage.
Yeah, we're very much the same with that. They're exactly, they're indicators. They're not hard targets. You know, we've all been in places where the metrics, you put the numbers in the spreadsheet and it says, well, you've achieved, you've not, and there's no leeway on it. It's an absolute sort of balance on behaviours as well. How you behave really internally.
That's a huge one, of course.
And then we've got all the core ones you've got there, and then also we look at FOS escalation rate, uphold rates, redress amounts, and we kind of look like the normal distribution. So if, you know, in your pot of how many people, you know, we've got 45, 50 people that are doing the same role or similar roles. You know, if you've got an outlier here who's constantly paying, you know, twice as much redress, but they never lose a case, it never goes to the FOS, and you've got someone here who doesn't pay much redress and all their cases are going to FOS, it enables the managers in those teams to have the conversation. So what are you doing different than this person? We do that buddying up and best practice and learning and stuff like that. So it's that whole, like exactly what you said, that whole rounded view. I absolutely think it's completely the wrong thing that you just look at one metric and say, oh, you've got out 4, well done, you've got out 2, well, bad luck.
Yeah.
There's so much more to it than that. And I wouldn't feel confident sitting in front of anybody or regulator going, it's just numbers, numbers, numbers. It's got to be that holistic view of right outcome for the customer in the right way. And sometimes that's difficult. You know, we've all got cost challenges, we've all got resource challenges, we've got, you know, a whole load of things we're trying to juggle. Balancing that and making sure that, you know, internal stakeholders more senior up to board level understand, you know, complaints is it needs the right investment, and you need to do it right, and it's difficult. It's difficult conversations around that.
Yeah, great. So just one final question for you both, actually. If somebody's thinking about moving into a complaints role, what advice would you give them? And, you know, you probably, Chris, from a wider view, but Paul, because you've done the role as well and you come through the ranks, what advice would you give?
I'm sorry, you go first. You go first, Chris. I need to prepare me answering me yet. I'll let you go first.
I think with any role, not just with complaints role, I think step back and look at what the role entails, understand what it is you're going to get into, understand what is your driver for doing it. And we've all seen people that want to do it just because it's the money, I want to move forward. That probably isn't the right reason to do it. You've got to do it because it's more vocational, really. It's more about you and wanting to do the right thing, back to what we talked about before. And then I would say
that's a great word for it, vocational. It absolutely is, isn't it? Yeah.
Because people do generally stick in complaints. I mean, it's easy to say, you know, when you look at the tenure of people, even if they move, you have attrition. Generally, people will move into another similar role, or, you know, or perhaps, you know, a role that they've got the skill sets from the complaints thing. But I think the other thing to do is go and see, go and ask, go and see, do some buddying, go, I'm really interested in working in your area. Can I spend a half an hour a day or half a day budding in your team? Speak to someone that you know that's doing the role, go on a Teams chat, have a quick phone call, you know, I'm thinking about this. Become a champion in your own business area. So a safe way of doing it is knowing claims. You know, you think you might want to move into complaints thing, speak to your manager in there and say, could I become the complaints champion for the team? Can I help with the team? Can I speak to customer relations and do briefings and hubs within the team? So there's a lot of stuff you can do which is quite safe to do before you take the plunge and then do the application, and then apply, and then you'll get feedback from the interview. You know, and you can take that away and do development on it. So I think the stage is to go through probably.
Yeah, and bring out some of the skills that we talked about today in this session, those kind of details and evidence and examples of those, because they're the things that hiring managers and talent managers are looking for, isn't it? Love the vocation bit. Paul, what's your view? What top tips?
I mean, I just echo everything Chris has said, and I completely agree with him. I mean, we all come to work to be paid, but I think with a complaints handler role, if you're not getting any sort of self-satisfaction from it, the role's not for you. I think it's that kind of role. You need to have the urge, the desire, and the hunger you want to help these customers. You want to resolve these complaints, and it's not just a tick box exercise. It is, you know, there is investigation. It is. You have that like communication and that. I feel like I know my customers when I'm working my complaints. I have that much interaction with them and understanding. And I've sat there and I felt, I've used the word empathy again, but I've sat there like almost with a broken heart listening to some of the stories, especially with the athlete funerals and all of these children involved. I mean, it's tear-jerking. Do you know what I mean? Then I've gone out and done the so again, I have to stay neutral. I've gone and looked on the other side, and the customer was right. So it's having that compassion and understanding for them, but at the same time, you have to be, you've got to be resilient with them. It's a very rewarding role. I believe it's a very I don't mean just for like payday or that. I think it's rewarding for what you get out of it personally. So as long as you've got the key skills such as resilience, again, I touched on before, don't take anything personally. You've got all the key expectations, empathize, motivation. You can work in a fast-paced environment as well as having attention to detail. Then it's a job I can't recommend even, but can't recommend more.
I love that. That's a great ending, actually. The fact that you're saying it's so rewarding, you know, it kind of evidences your skills, celebrates your skills, gives you a chance to really, you know, change the dial with customers. And, you know, and if you want to, it can become a vocation, but it also can be a springboard to other things. So, thank you so much, guys. Thanks for joining today's session. Thanks to everyone who's listening, or if you are, there's loads of information on our website. And if you want to link in with Chris and Paul, they're both on LinkedIn, so feel free to do it. And again, thank you so much for joining me.
You're more than welcome.
Okay, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Take care.
Right, great stuff. That was brilliant, guys. Let me stop recording. Stop recording. Oh, brilliant.
All right.